Good morning and welcome. I've decided, I'm just feeling called to occasionally share a memory between my DM and I. I've been writing them out on a couple of different social medias that I know he lurks on, and I do it mostly for me, but I still smile because he finds ways to show me that he's lurking and that sometimes I bring one up that either was already on his mind or that he'd forgotten about. In any case, I figure I'll do this when I feel called to, especially since I'm already sharing the story of us. Maybe I'll just make it like like a side tale or something like that. In any case, I'm thinking today, actually what I'm feeling like is that he's thinking about this, but then it's got me thinking about it. But, all that absurdity and nonsense we're embracing, right? So there was this time that I decided I was going to take all of us camping. When I was little, that was one of the things that my family did. My aunts drug us out to go camping, or that's what my mom called it, drug us out. She didn't really like camping, but I loved camping. I loved it so much. And a lot of really great memories when I was younger of going camping. And I wanted to share that. And at the time, my DM's daughter was I want to say 9 or 10-ish, and our oldest son. Well, wait, let's see, because I know he was around 6 years old. So 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. So his daughter was around 13, and I wanted to take us. We didn't have a lot of money, so I did my research, and I asked my family where their favorite free camping spots were in the state. And we went to a place called Cloud Bluff. And I didn't recall ever being there before, but it was an adventure to me. I said, all right, let's go. And I remember too, because this was my first official adult camping trip, where I was in charge and I was the one who knew what to do, and nobody else was able to go with us, but I was determined to do it. And I had this 1980s Dodge cargo van, and we decked it out. It was one that was kind of a gift of sorts from a friend that I'd helped out. And we'd put this really plush bench seat in the back and done it out real nice, and we loaded it up. And it was funny because I was worried about the little things more than the big things. Like, I'm thinking, okay, we have 2 young kids, and I'm the only adult who knows anything, and I was worried mostly about can openers and things that could go wrong with the engine of the van. And so I was like thinking about, okay, what are all the tricks that I know that I've seen my family do when something's happened with a car, and what can I get together, and like what can we do if we don't have signal on a phone? Like, I'm thinking we're going to be out in the middle of nowhere. I don't want to be stuck out there without extra things. So I included things like pantyhose, which you can use if you have like a fan belt go out, or a belt, so another belt in the engine. And I put in some extra oil, and then I fished out, because we were in my grandfather's old house. It already had a ton of things in it. And so I packed like 4 can openers, and my DM laughed so bad. Like, he thought I was just being silly. And I was, in a way, but I also know that there's been half a dozen camping trips where we've had like 3 or 4 families go, and nobody could find a can opener, and half the food we brought was in cans. And this time going around, I made sure that a lot of our food was canned, so it wasn't, the animals couldn't smell it, and wanted to make sure that it wasn't perishable, because we didn't have a lot of money. And we were only going to be gone a few days. And I brought a little bit of meat because I wanted to show him cooking over the fire and things like that. And I also made sure to bring some newspaper and matches, and I don't know, it was funny. I was excited, and I was trying to also show some of the things that you pack and that you put in if you're going camping. Like, I definitely did overdo it, but I would rather have overdone it than underdone it, and been out there and been like, oh crap, what do we do now? And I'm also a big believer in Murphy's Law, in the sense that usually when you're prepared for something, nothing happens. And so I just made sure we had everything. I mean, and it's funny because this cargo van was big, and I filled it up. So we took the 2 kids. We had 2 dogs at a time. At the time, we had Bear, who was a chocolate lab mix, and he was, I want to say he was a few years old at the time. And we had Tika, who was a Staffordshire American pit mix. Really, really good girl. Bear was he was a mischief maker. But we went, and we took them, and we took the 2 kids camping. And I drove us out there, and I love it too, because I can remember going camping, and when you go to the good spots, usually you have to drive along these really precarious roads that are along the sides of various mountains and valleys, and they're like just barely big enough for a car and a half, so you pray that you're not going to pass too many other cars on the way out there. And Cloud Bluff was one of those. It was one of those places that, I mean, it's middle of nowhere. It's not anybody's choice camping spot. And we found out why, too, because the camping spaces were right next to a big lake, which I thought was perfect because I love swimming and I love fishing, and I wanted to show all of them that. But hard lesson learned, never camp that close to a lake, because at night, all the bugs that were out on the lake like to come and visit the campfire and any lanterns that might be there. In any case, we got there the first night, and of course it started raining, so we had to get the tent set up pretty quick. And my DM had never set up a tent, so it was interesting getting his help in doing that. And we had a small tent. It was like a 4-person tent. And anyways, we get up in the morning, and I had chosen this place because it had a small hike on a bluff. It's called Bluff, and it was near a lake where we could have fun, and it was free, and I decided we were all going to go hiking. Now, for one thing, I'd been pretty sedentary. I've been a writer a lot of my life. I've been doing coaching, and I spend a lot of time learning. I'm Gemini rising, so I like to learn. I'm a polymath and a polyphiliac. But we went to start this climb, and I didn't know how far up it was going to be. I didn't know. I didn't know a lot, but I did know I'm going to pack some snacks because we have a young boy with us who will probably want snacks, and I otherwise figured, whatever, we'll see what happens. We'll get up as far as we can. If we have to come back down, we'll come back down. Now, what's funny is, so my stepdaughter was all gung-ho about it. She was like, yeah, let's do this. And my son was, at first, all about it. And my DM at first he didn't show up very much, but he was nervous. He'd never done anything like that before. And we started to go up, and it took a couple hours, especially with me in the back. At one point, I was so tired, but I wasn't going to give up, and everybody else was ahead of me. I told my DM to go ahead because the kids were full of energy, so they were, of course, well ahead. And I didn't want to dull their fun, so I said, "You go ahead up there. I'll just make my way up slowly in my Capricorn way." And I attached the leash of my young dog Bear to my belt, and I just had him pull me up a lot of the steeper inclines, which he didn't mind. And my other dog Tika, who was really, really good off the leash, she would go. She was kind of like a herding dog, which is so funny. She would go up and check on the kids and my DM, and then come back and check on me and sniff at Bear, and then go back up. And I don't know, she was very much reminded me of Nana from the original Peter Pan movies, just taking care of everybody. In any case, we did get to the top. And what made me laugh the most was that I have had a fear of heights for some time, but I was a weird kid in that I was scared of heights, but I still like to go all the way up. I used to get stuck in trees, really, really tall evergreen trees, because I would get so excited that I wanted to go up, but I didn't think about the coming down part. Now, with having that experience going up this mountain, I was aware that there was probably going to come a point in time where we would be very high up and we might not be able to go much further. I assumed the kids would probably get a little bit worried, and my DM would get worried because he's got a very big fear of heights. and that we just go up as high as we could. Now, the funny thing was, the trail that wound around this mountain, you couldn't see below for a while. It was a very wide trail. There was a lot of trees on the side. So it kind of just felt like you were just walking up a really long, tall hill until we got near the actual bluff. And then all you could see was the tops of the trees, and the path got very, very small. And then we get up to where there are no trees, and all you can see is the beautiful, beautiful valley out below. And I was already feeling a little bit scared, but I figured if everybody else was doing okay, I'd just keep it to myself. You know, I figured we could practice good safety. It wouldn't be a big deal. And we get to this point to where you can see the tip. You can see the bluff. There's a couple of small trees on it. Mostly just has these beautiful wildflowers, orange and red and yellow. And my stepdaughter was all about, I'm going to go up there. Just super brave. I'm going to go up there. And she's ready to do it. But our son had decided, this was before his little brother was born, he had decided he didn't want to go any further. And he stopped dead in the middle of the trail. And it's a very small trail at this point. Like, you can barely fit a couple of people. He did not want to go further. And at that point in time, I could see the sweat and the red facedness of my DM, who was already ready to be done. I could tell that he had basically just been soldiering on because the kids had kept going, and he didn't want them to be up there alone. And so when our son had stopped, he was like kind of grateful, I think, that he had stopped. And at that point, my DM had put both the dogs on the leash because he was so afraid that the dogs would fall off and get hurt. And I come up there because I had already tried to let the dogs off the leash. I already knew we've had dogs camping all over the place, and dogs can climb around all sorts of things that people can't, and they're big dogs. And I'm going, it's not worth them pulling us off the side if they see a squirrel or something like that, and I know they'll be fine. But my DM didn't trust it. He was trying to protect the kids and protect the dogs and protect himself and figure out what I'm doing and why I'm not freaking out. Little does he know I am freaking out, but I've done enough of these experiences to know better than to let that show. And so when we get to this point where our son is stopped and freaked out, and he doesn't want to go forward and doesn't want to go back. And I could tell my DM's kind of feeling very similar. My stepdaughter wants to go up more, but I can't walk past the trail of my son and my DM. So I'm going, all right, what's a good thing to do now? And I was ready to sit for a while anyways, and I thought, you know what, this is kind of perfect. We could just sit here until we're calm and move. But then my DM was like, I want to get down. I want to get down right now. So I said, okay, well, why don't you hand me the leashes to the dogs, and you sit there with our son for a minute. And I told her stepdaughter, I said, it's not very far. We can see you right there. Like, the top is literally, you just, it's a grassy hill at this point. You can go up there if you want. Otherwise, but we'll wait for you, and we can see you, and don't go anywhere we can't see you, and then come back down. And she decided she was good, that she didn't want to go up if we weren't going to go up. And I said, I'm sorry, your brother and your dad are not going to go much further. And she kind of laughed and sighed, and so did I. And so I had the leashes to the dogs. And as I immediately turned and unleashed them. And my DM went, what are you doing? And both the dogs were so excited, and they went running down the side. There was a bit of it wasn't a drop, but it was a steep incline, and they go running down there, and you can't see them. And I'm not freaked out at all. I know this is. I've had dogs camping a whole bunch. This isn't unusual behavior to me, but my DM had not experienced this before, and his mouth's wide open, and he's looking down, and he looks at me like, what did you do? I said, just wait a minute. And then you could hear this kind of ba-dum, and then suddenly they come running back up. They come up and they lick him, and they lick my son, and they look at me, and then they run back down, and then we see them come back up on the other side of the trail, and he just looks at me like, I don't know, like like somehow I was psychic, that I knew that it would be like that, which I did, but it was almost as if I was magical at that point in time. And he didn't even say anything at that point in time, but later it asked me, like, how did you know that? I'm like, well, because I've had dogs camping before. I knew they would be fine, and I knew you were just making more work for yourself and trying to keep them safe. I wouldn't have had them come up there with us if I didn't think that they would be safe, especially not with 2 kids in tow. And I knew once we were in the anxious part of the climb and needing to go back down, the last thing we needed was to worry about what the dogs were doing. And he was very grateful of that moment. And then, so we didn't have to hold on to them. And I managed to get myself around the other side of them for a minute. And I was going to try to walk behind them and kind of like put my hand on my Diab's hips and say, okay, you hold on to our son, I'll hold on to you, you move down. Go back down the trail the way we came. And he didn't like that very much, so I crawled back around them and got in the front, and I had our son put his hands on my hip. I said, you just hold on to me, and we're going to go down the trail. And I checked at our stutter. I said, you good back there? And she goes, oh, yeah. Like, she wasn't worried at all. She was so brave. And we made our way back down to where the trail was wider and more okay. And then it was better. And our son was feeling better about it. And he's like wanting to see what the dogs are doing, because they're now excited and sniffing every little thing and chasing chipmunks and squirrels and just all over the place. And my Diab is so funny. He held my hand so tight the whole way back down that trail. And to make matters even more comical, when we got towards the bottom of the trail, the dog Bear, he came back over to us at one point, and he reeked so bad. And I knew the smell. I'd smelled it once before when I was younger, as he rolled in bear poop, which was very fitting considering his name was Bear, which I named him that because he was this beautiful, beautiful brown color when he was little, and his eyes were kind of a gold color, and he looked like a little teddy bear. I saw a picture of him before I went to pick him up. He was a rescue pup. And I was like, oh, you're a little teddy bear. And so, anyways, it was fitting that he had rolled in bear poop. But of course, I had not thought to bring dog shampoo, which was something that I looked at my Dia, but I said, see, there's always something. There's always something that you learn when you're out, and always something you're going to forget that you wish you had had. And I tried so hard to wash him off, but it was getting dark because the climb had taken a lot, and so had trying to get us turned around. So we go we go down, and I get him washed as best I can, and it still didn't help. He reeked so bad. And so I tried to have him and our other dog sleep in the van, but Bear had a fear of abandonment, and so he howled, and there were some other campers, and I said, I can't leave him in there. So I brought him in the tent. What was funny was my stepdaughter and our son were in there, and they wanted the dogs to sleep with them, which me and my Dan were like, oh yeah, if you can stomach that smell, we would love it if they would sleep over there with you. But they both wanted to sleep next to me. And even better was Tika was very well behaved, just naturally. I was really lucky to have her. She was a great, great friend, and I miss her a lot. And she would sleep on my side behind me, and my DM is next to me. But Bear, he had to sleep by my head, which meant that his smelly, stinky body was right above my DM's head the whole frickin' night. And no matter how many times I tried to get him to move, to bribe him to move, to yell at him to move, to get away, because I knew how bad it smelled, and I'm willing to take it on because they're my dogs, and I'll deal with it if I have to. But my poor DM had to try to sleep all night with the smell of Bear covered in bear poop over his head. And so, of course, the kids really didn't understand why my DM was a little bit grumpy the next day. But after we got back home, and there's more fun that had in that story. I'll probably share it another time. But when we got home, that became one of the best stories. And it's one of my favorite things about our story is that there's a lot of things that my DM did not get to do growing up or even as an adult. I mean, so wrapped up in toxic cycles and being quite sheltered when he was young, that there was all these experiences. I realized that, I mean, I don't want to say I took them for granted, but I assumed everybody had some experience like it. And there was so many things that he'd never done. And it was so great to be able to bring an experience like that into his life. And then especially to watch him retell the story to all of his friends and family and everybody about this crazy, amazing adventure that we had, that really a lot of people have had adventures like that, but nobody would see it in such a magical, amazing way as he saw it. And probably partly because I like to make things like that. I like to make things more magical like that. And anyways, I'm going to end this story here, to be continued for another time. But I hope that it warms some of your hearts and encourages many of you to tell your own stories, the good and the bad. It's healing. All right, I'll catch you in the next video.